9 months ago, I was in Israel with the Center for Jewish Life for a birthright trip. For me, the trip was a way to get a little bit closer to answering the question I've been asked to speak on today. What does being Jewish mean to me? I decided that I would have a second bar mitzvah on the trip as a way of recommitting myself to Judaism. Rabbi Ira Dunn, who was co-leading the trip, said he could talk through our ceremonies with the few of us who had decided to hold B'nai Mitzvot during our time in Israel. So I took him up on it. After a long afternoon of shopping and eating in the art market of Tzfat, we were called to a group meeting spot. And from there, we left to walk to the bus. Rabbi Ira and I ended up in the back of the pack, and I asked if we could talk about my ceremony. And of course, he said yes. We spent what felt like hours strolling through the winding stone paths of Tzfat. It was golden hour, and our words were soft like the shadows of the ancient buildings we passed between. I told Rabbi Ira that I wanted to figure out what, if anything, in the Jewish tradition connected with what I care about. I told him I'd been spending years engaging with the issues of homelessness and talking about empathy and storytelling. And in turn, he said that he had some stories to tell me. One of these that stuck out to me was written by I.L. Peretz. It was about a rabbi who disappeared every year on the night of Yom Kippur. When a new community member arrived, the rabbi's followers told the outsider that the rabbi went to heaven each year, connecting to God and his angels in preparation for this holy time. But the outsider remained skeptical. So on the night before Yom Kippur, he snuck into the rabbi's house and hid under his bed. The next day, he followed the rabbi around from a distance, eager to know the truth. And nothing seemed too suspicious until the early evening, when the rabbi exchanged his normal clothes for peasant's rags, placed an axe in a satchel, and walked into the woods on the outskirts of town. Deep in the forest, the outsider watched as the rabbi chopped up wood, hauled it to a small house, and knocked on the door. A frail woman answered, and the rabbi set up a fire for her and her children, even though chopping wood and creating fire are normally forbidden on holy days. The man following the rabbi was shocked. He realized that the rabbi's disappearance was actually an act of compassion. The next day, when the new community members came to ask where the rabbi had been on the night of Yom Kippur, his followers said he went up to heaven. But the outsider, knowing what he knew, said, if not higher. Once we boarded the bus on that day, I sat alone and wrote in my journal. The thoughts poured out. Through that story and others, Rabbi Ira had helped me see a whole array of ways in which Judaism connected to my life. Soon enough, we arrived at a vineyard to do some wine tasting. And when we got there, we deboarded the bus, set down our things, and went around the side of the building to the bathroom. I was standing there at the sink, just washing my hands, and I looked up at myself in the mirror. My whole life, I'd always felt Jewish. I never quite felt like I knew enough or did enough to call myself part of this community. But that evening, I thought about the stories that the rabbi had told me. I saw my curly hair, which had never been curly before. I was letting it grow out, and I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in my life, I really felt Jewish. In the months after our trip, a lot happened. I went to London with my a cappella group, and then to South Africa for a semester abroad. And then I flew home halfway through because of a global pandemic. And I spent 5 months with my family in San Diego. Over the course of those months, my connection to Judaism blurred again. I fell out of the practice, I lost touch with the community, and I felt the familiar sense that I dipped into Judaism and then dipped back out. I was asked to speak today about what being Jewish means to me, and at first I actually felt a lot of shame confronting this question. Now, after months of losing touch with what I'd learned in Israel, I was supposed to talk about Judaism, but I said yes, thinking maybe this would be an opportunity to reconnect in some way. My family hadn't really celebrated Yom Kippur when I was growing up, so I talked to Rabbi Julie Roth about the meaning of the celebration. She graciously and patiently helped me understand the reasons we come together and the traditions that help underpin that coming together. And what she said helped me realize that much of my conception of Judaism is actually encapsulated in the way we practice it during this time of year. There's one prayer we say over and over during Yom Kippur, she told me, the 13 attributes. We say it for God and for ourselves. God, God, merciful and compassionate God, slow to anger, full of chesed and truth. And I thought when she said that, chesed, I've heard that before. It was in my conversation in Tzfat with Rabbi Ira. After recounting the story of the rabbi who went higher than heaven, he told me about chesed shel emet, the purest form of giving. It's what we do when we follow the Jewish practice of leaving stones atop our loved ones' graves, telling them you won't be forgotten without expecting anything in return. It was a concept I'd connected to my life through my passion for humanizing people experiencing homelessness through storytelling, a notion of altruism that I'd long grappled with and meditated on. And here it was 9 months later, showing up at Yom Kippur. Rabbi Julie told me that an important aspect of the 13 attributes is Rav Chesed Ve'emet, seeing the truth with compassion. She told me the story of the golden calf, of God wishing to destroy the Israelites for worshiping an idol fashioned from gold jewelry after he had just freed them from slavery in Egypt. And she told me that Moses pleaded for God not to destroy his people, that they needed his loving kindness. Rav Chesed Ve'emet was a call for God to see the truth of his people's sins, but to see that truth with compassion. It was a call for us to see ourselves, our own shortcomings, with that same sort of compassion. In my practice of Judaism, I've often felt like I'm not doing enough to learn about the traditions, to connect to the culture, to really understand objectively what it means to be Jewish. But through the gift of being asked to reflect upon my own journey in writing the speech, I've realized that Judaism even has an answer for that, and it lies in Rav Chesed Ve'emet. There's no one way to be Jewish, and I have to see the truth of my own life with compassion. All of my shortcomings, all my missteps, all my oversights, they are all part of my journey of self-understanding. I have to allow myself to grow at my own pace, to embrace the ebb and flow of Judaism in my life. So, standing before you today on Zoom, I have finally found an answer to that question. What does being Jewish mean to me? Judaism, to me, is a constant act of discovery. It's finding things put into words, beautiful words, that I felt so deeply, but have never seen embodied in language and tradition. Through that, it's knowing that I'm not alone in those sensibilities. I know as I learn and grow and change that my answer to that question might change as well. But I also know that I am a part of this community in order to learn, in order to grow, in order to change. And this space, this Jewish community, in whatever form, is my own as well. Thank you.